Hi all, it's me Amanda and I'm here for my monthly book wrap up. Didn't read as many books this month. I only read 7. Say only because that's a pretty good amount of books still. Maybe not as many as some of the booktubers I watch, but that's okay. We don't need to compare ourselves to anybody else, right? Alright, so let's get started. I'll start with the physical books. Small pile this time. So the first one I've got is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. I read the other 2 books in this trilogy a long time ago. So this is the 3rd book in the original Mistborn trilogy. To clarify, there are more Mistborn books, but they take place 300 years after this one. So finally got around to it, and it took me forever. I expected that because this is a mass market paperback size, but still, it's a big honker of a book, and it's not as light of a book as some of the other things I've been reading lately. So, what to say about this one? It's a little hard to talk about because it's the 3rd book, and I don't want to spoil the book itself, and I can't really spoil the other 2 books. Sorry. It's very strange, the light kind of hurt my eyes, and my contacts might be wonky. Anyway, let's get back to talking about this book. So, as a whole, this is a really good conclusion. I know a lot of people absolutely think that this was a great ending to the series, and I agree. It is really good. I got really excited about a lot of the loose ends that got tied up, and the mysteries and the pieces. It all fit together and it made sense. Good stuff. Now, I wasn't absolutely in love with it, though. I give it a 4.5 stars. So, my issues were more nitpicky and more based on my own personal feelings type of things. So, not actual criticisms of this book, because I thought it was great. There's one character, I don't mind how this character, the ending for this character, but I was a little upset about how it happened. Again, leaving that vague. It just bothered me. And then there's a reunion that I really wanted to happen that didn't happen. So that's pretty much it on this one. Otherwise, it is really fantastic, though. Highly recommend the Mistborn, the first 3 Mistborn books. And if you're into fantasy, I doubt you'll be disappointed. I know some people aren't into it, but the majority of people really do love this series. Next we have, for my physical books, Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Now this book was so good. So for me, I have to say this is the first time I've given a romance novel 5 stars. I read a lot of romance. And I'll be honest, a lot of it is more in the 3-star range. I've had plenty of 4-star romances, but I'm kind of picky about what I consider to be absolutely perfect. And this is pretty much perfect. It's really good. Now, basic premise of this one is it's about Daniel and Alexis. Daniel is a small town guy, and he does all kinds of odd jobs for everybody in the town. He's really sweet. He's like a carpenter, but he also runs a bed and breakfast, and he's technically the mayor of the town too. Just an all-around really sweet, helpful guy. Alexis is a doctor, and she decided specifically to work in the ER, and she has a very big family legacy going on. And one day, she accidentally runs off the road and gets her car stuck. Fortunately, not, irreparable. And Daniel comes to her rescue and gets her out. Then she decides to go to the local VFW, right? And after that, she sees Daniel there, and they actually have a one-night stand. She is all freaked out that she did this. She runs off, and there's complications abound. He is almost 10 years younger than her, and also she is coming out of a nasty divorce with an emotionally abusive man. What I really liked about this book, first of all, I thought the connection between the characters was great. There's lots of chemistry, and I was sucked in by them, and I kept wanting to know what was going to happen for them. And Of course, this one does feature a lot of people's worst enemy, the third act, conflict, or breakup. Now, in this particular case, I think that this is done exceptionally in this book, because the whole time that we are getting into this, we know that this is going to happen. It's not a surprise. It doesn't come out of nowhere. And it's not like it's a matter of the two characters not being able to communicate. Alexis is very honest and open with Daniel about these things. You have to see her situation and what her family is like, especially her father, in order to understand why she feels that a relationship between herself and Daniel won't work. It's very basic, like classic, like Hallmark movie kind of a premise, but it takes it deeper and it takes it further, and there's a real conflict there instead of it just being like, well, why doesn't she just move to the town? There's more for her to actually have to deal with, and more inner turmoil, for lack of a better way of putting it, for her to deal with in order to be able to do what she wants in this case. So I thought this was a really fantastic read. I highly recommend it. It's adorable. I also have read the second one, Yours Truly, but considering I read it in May, I'm not going to add it this time. But I want to mention it briefly because that book was so stinking good. This is a great series. I love it. My last physical book is Longbourn by Joe Baker. So this one, basic concept is it's actually Pride and Prejudice. It takes place in that universe and everything, and it's during Pride and Prejudice, but told by the perspective of the help, of their servants. So this, I wanted to read this, not so much for the Pride and Prejudice aspect, but I wanted to read a romance story that was specifically not the rich nobility. And it's really hard to find anything like that, or at least maybe in the defense of the universe, I haven't searched very hard, but it's not something I typically come across. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But this one, unfortunately, it really wasn't quite what I was hoping for. We have a romance between one of the maids, Sarah, and their new footman named James. And he's like one of those more stoic, doesn't show how he feels guys, and she's kind of, I don't know, a little bit overly fiery, feisty towards him for no apparent reason. I thought this book had some interesting insights into the characters and whatnot, but to be honest, I feel like you don't even need the Pride and Prejudice aspect of it, which is what I was worried was going to be the case. I just don't think it really adds anything to this, like anything positive. It could have just been a book with different characters entirely, and it wouldn't have changed a whole lot in here. You also get the feeling that the author has certain like feelings and attitudes towards certain characters that could be warranted or unwarranted. Like, she clearly doesn't like Mr. Bennet and made him pretty much a creep in this one. Wickham is like the absolute worst. He is just like a straight up pedophile in this. He's terrible. And then she has a nicer view of Mr. Collins, which is fine. I don't like hate Mr. Collins, but nevertheless. Anyway, this book is a big old bummer too. Like, it's fine that like Sarah has a hard life. I was like fine with all of that. There is it delves into another character's past at one point, and we get into a whole bunch of like war sequences and stuff, which I found entirely unnecessary and like just super grim, and like, why is this in here? Like, it's too much. It's too much in my opinion. This book was a slow-paced slog, and it brought me down, and like, it put me in a reading slump, basically, because on one hand, I was enjoying the book enough that I didn't want to like DNF it, but on the other hand, I never wanted to read it, so I probably should have just given up, but I didn't. I got through it, and it took me a whole week, which it's not a long book, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. I mean, it wasn't a bad book. I just don't necessarily recommend it because it was a rough one. Okay, now to talk about the ones I don't physically have, so I can put a little image over here. First, we've got A Man Called Uva. I actually borrowed this one from my father-in-law. Now, I mean, if you're into books, you probably have heard of this book at the very least, if not have read it already. But basically, it's about a man named Uva, who he's very grumpy and closed off, doesn't really have any friends, and he has made a decision about his life, I guess we'll just say. I don't want to spoil too much about it. And then circumstances change for him. He ends up accidentally adopting a cat, and he also ends up accidentally becoming friends with his neighbors. And you get this juxtaposition of what, like, it talks about, it basically tells you the story of Uva's life and explains why he is the way he is. And it is, in fact, it's a solid, very touching, emotional book. I really, really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 5 stars. It's great. Highly recommend. Check it out. My only audiobook, I wasn't very good about audiobooks this month, was We Didn't Mean to Go to Sea by Arther Ransome. I think this is the 7th book in the Swallow and Amazon series. My husband absolutely loves that series, and this is one of his favorites from the series. It was solid. So, basic premise is the Walker children. They end up, this young gentleman is like, hey, you can come sailing with me, but we're not going to go to sea. We're just going to hang out on the river. And Mrs. Walker's like, okay, sounds like fun. Just be back in time for your dad. Your dad's coming home. And so, of course, it's called We Didn't Mean to Go Sea. And guess what? They accidentally go to sea without Jim, the guy who's going to, keep an eye on them, and it's his ship. There is a real, actual, decent explanation for all of this, which I appreciated. So this one's a solid adventure book. It's great. It's honestly, most of it is very believable, like in terms of how things happen. And there are some like big coincidences, but I thought they were fine. They were cute. There was only one thing I didn't like in particular about this book, and that is one of the characters gets very fixated on a story they were told. And as a result, it prevents him from wanting to ask for help to a point of absolute absurdity. And it's just like, it's clearly a plot device to make the kids do everything on their own. And that kind of annoyed me. I don't like seeing the strings. But otherwise, this is a very solid read. Highly recommend it if you like this series or if you like kids' adventure stories. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, so another good one. Next, on my Kindle, I read Rafe, a buff male nanny. And that one is by Rebekah Weatherspoon. Now, I had high hopes for this one. I mean, I know it's just called Rafe, a buff male nanny, but I thought, like, this is a great concept. Like, I like the idea of, like, he's this buff, tough-looking dude, but he's caring and he's, nurturing. Like, I thought that would be great. And I mean, in a sense it is, but I'll be honest with you. Before I get into it, let's talk about the actual premise of this book. So it's Sloane. She is a doctor. In fact, she's a heart surgeon. And then Rafe, a male nanny. Sloane ends up in a pickle because her absolutely terrible nanny leaves in the middle of the day and leaves her 2 6-year-old twin daughters home alone. And so she needs a nanny and she needs one fast. And here comes Rafe to save the day. This book has a lot potentially going for it. And I have to say, it wasn't bad by any means. But I just feel like the whole thing fell flat and it just wasn't what I was hoping it would be. Which I know that's not always a fair way to judge things, but I thought, oh, okay, he's a buff male nanny. Maybe we'll have this whole, like, first of all, we have this cool juxtaposition of him being, buff and tough looking, but he's caring. And then we'll also have, like, forbidden, because you can't date your kid's nanny, right? Like, you can't do that. That's what I wanted, and that's not what this book is. This book is insta attraction between the two of them. And they don't really try to fight it. Like, there's not much fighting. And that instantly, just wasn't my thing. There are a lot of good things about it. There's lots of diversity. Rafe is, in fact, what I described. However, I do feel like for most of the book, both Rafe and Sloane just kind of fall flat as characters. We do get more development, but I feel like the development comes later on, and it's just not... The characters themselves during the actual story just don't feel like they have a whole lot of personality, in my opinion. I felt more personality from the side characters, if anything else. And yeah, it's good enough. It's smutty. And the smut's pretty good, but it's not anything incredible. I would say if you like the concept of it, this does not hurt to read. Like, there's nothing bad about it. It just didn't tick what I was hoping for. I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next book I read was Peony Dreadful. Sorry, I have a hard time saying Peony, by Nancy Warren. This one is, I saw there was a sale on Amazon, and it's a cozy mystery. I was like, oh, I want to start reading cozy mysteries. So this one takes place in England. It's first person point of view from Peony. And she tells you all about everything about her. And basically, Peony's a witch. She lives in England, but she's American. Her mom's Scottish. And she lives in this beautiful little cozy village, and she's a florist. She likes to cast happy spells for people in town. I mean, I don't know. There's not a whole lot to say there. And then there's a new girl arrives in town who's quite a bit younger, and she's like, oh, I can tell that girl's a witch. We get to meet the cast of characters, and of course there is in fact a murder mystery later on in the story. Now, honestly really enjoyed this. This was what I wanted from a cozy mystery. It's simple, it's sweet. I liked the characters, with the exception of Norman the parrot. There is a talking parrot, but he talks like a person, not like a parrot. No, he didn't hit it for me. But pretty much everything else I really liked about this. It wasn't anything like amazing, but it was super enjoyable and really sweet. And it did really give me nice cozy vibes. I read it rather quickly, and it helped me get out of my reading slump. So I think this book has plenty going for it. I'd actually purchased the second book, and then I was like, well, I'll go ahead and get the first book. And I'm really glad I did, because there's a lot of background that I would have missed if I hadn't, if I had just gone to the second book right away. The mystery, the resolution of the mystery, it made perfect sense. The pieces fit and everything, but it did feel kind of like quick and ham-fisted. But you know what? That's fine. I wasn't looking for like a super good mystery here. I was looking more for the cozy, and the cozy is good. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Oh, and actually that's it. I forgot that was it. I really didn't read nearly as much this month. But you know what? At least in terms of quality, I had 2 5-star reads. I had some other higher starred reads. It's just that I unfortunately did get kind of slumpy. I think I'm out of the slump. Knock on wood. Hope the best for me. Hope you're all doing well, and see you next month for books. Oh, if you actually watch to the end, leave me a cloud or a rain emoji or something like that. It has been super rainy here. I'm hoping that the sun will come out and it'll finally, get nice out again. Bye, everyone.